All right, I think we'll get started. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you all so much for joining us today. My name is Sarah Neville Morgan, and I'm a Deputy Superintendent of Public Instruction at the Opportunities for All branch, OFAB, at the California Department of Education under the leadership of State Superintendent of Public Instruction, Tony Thurmond. We're so happy to have all of you join us today for our September edition of OFAB's P3 webinar series. Today, we will begin by exploring how districts can implement universal preschool with a P3 frame and end with a conversation with several district leaders about how they have approached implementation within their own districts. Before we start, a big thank you to my team for making this happen, especially Beth Malloy, Steve Profiter, Sheila Self, Alana Andrade, Sierra Montana, and Teresa Maldonado, along with everyone else. Next slide. Before we dive in, let me introduce to you our presenters today. So in addition to myself and the district leaders, we are excited to be joined today by Sheila Self, an education administrator in the Early Learning and Care Division, overseeing the Early Education Systems Improvement Office, which promotes P3 activities within the division, and Hannah Melnick, a former elementary educator and senior policy advisor at the Learning Policy Institute. Next slide. Why are we all here today? In terms of objectives for our time together, we hope you will come away from this webinar with more information about the scope of new funding to support universal preschool implementation, as well as P3 coherence. And to clarify, when all of us at CDE talk about universal preschool, we are talking about transitional kindergarten, our California State Preschool Program, and Head Start, as well as the wraparound child care and early learning programs necessary to support our working families, while also providing rich learning experiences to support children's learning and development. We also hope you walk away with a shared vision of meaningful equity for all of California's children and some initial steps you can take to help ensure all young children have access to an effective, inclusive, and culturally and linguistically responsive early learning experience. Finally, we hope you will walk away today with not only an understanding of why alignment and partnership with the early grades is critical to children's success, but also with specific ideas about how to start that process in your own work. How to infuse a developmentally informed approach across the P3 years, and how to start building towards that vision through your implementation of UPK. Next slide. Before we dive into our content for the day, we always like to get a sense of who is in the room with, or in this case, who is on the line with us. So we're going to launch our first poll to find out what type of organization each of you work with or for. You should be able to see this in front of you now. If you need to, you can scroll down, but you can select from all that apply and what type of organization do you work with and what role are you in. It looks like we have about 80% of the respondents so far. We'll give the rest of you a minute or two to catch up, and then we'll be able to share the responses. It looks like about 9% are elementary school administrator educator staff, about 19% are school district staff, 34% from a preschool program, 11% from other early learning and care programs, 10% community-based organization, 21% work at a county office. We don't have anyone who indicated they were a tribal partner today. 7% are state agencies, 8% higher education, and 14% other. Thank you so much for your responses. Going on to the next slide. Now that we know who is here, let's dive into our overview of our P3 vision at the state level. We all know the traditional approach of separating preschool from elementary school hinders our efforts to meet the needs of our most vulnerable children and sustain gains made in quality preschool programs. Driven by the need to create more equitable opportunities to prevent the achievement gap and to actively dismantle inequities and historic racism, the California Department of Education, or CDE, is bringing new focused resources and philanthropic partnerships to its pursuit of strengthening programming and creating a more aligned early education and elementary system. To achieve these goals, the CDE has developed a plan to engage community partners, conduct research, and pilot solutions. This will include supporting expansion of high-quality preschool programs, including TK Head Start and our California State Preschool Program, and also ensuring equitable access to preschool, which means access to a full day, full year, and alternative work schedule care so that working parents have meaningful and genuine choices, as well as access to early intervention and parental support services for children with disabilities by strengthening the transition of services and implementing universal design for learning in all programs and ensuring children are in the least restrictive environments. It means implementing best practices for supporting multilingualism and multiliteracy through early identification of dual language learners and resources for school leaders, and acknowledging and actively working to dismantle inequity by ensuring integration of diverse children in classrooms, eliminating suspension and expulsion, seclusion and restraint, and other racist exclusionary discipline practices. And finally, it means focusing on supporting efforts to sustain early gains by aligning instruction, assessment, and best practices across the P3 years, supporting the P3 workforce through changes in credentials and higher education coursework and improved professional learning opportunities, and integrating and using data to inform policies through stronger connections between preschool and K-12 data and greater data in critical areas such as dual language learners. Next slide. A major pillar of our P3 vision is to create and implement effective preschool program options for all of our 4-year-old children and for as many 3-year-old children as possible. The CDE has developed what it hopes will be an inclusive and collaborative planning and implementation process for UPK implementation, utilizing the support of educators, researchers, and community partners across California. In seeking a structure for these partnerships and engagement efforts, the CDE has utilized a constellation model, similar to the model leveraged to support California's Transforming the Workforce effort. What we are calling the state's UPK P3 alignment constellation approach is depicted on the graphic you can see on this slide. CDE is operating this constellation approach in partnership with the Commission on Teacher Credentialing, or CTC, and it includes 2 state-level stewardship groups, the State Leadership Team and the UPK P3 Kitchen Cabinet. The majority of our work will be focused within our 4 constellations: the Local Implementation and Promising Practices Constellation, the Research Constellation, the Workforce Development Constellation, which will be led by the CTC in partnership with CDE, and the Partnerships, Communication, and Strategy Constellation, which will work closely with leaders and design teams from other constellations to understand, identify, and facilitate opportunities for diverse partner engagement across all areas of work. Each of these constellations will be led by state agency staff, supported by external consultants, and will leverage groups of external partners to advance the state-level work. Small design teams of external partners, willing and able to roll up their sleeves and spearhead the work of each of the constellations, will do some initial work. Larger work groups for each constellation will also be invited to contribute their expertise and offer feedback as the work moves forward. Broad engagement of our community partners will be key to the success of our work. The partners and constituencies affected by this work are many, and we will work alongside our partnerships, communication, and strategy team to ensure all of our partners are given multiple opportunities to shape the direction of California's UPK implementation and our P3 alignment work over the course of the coming years. Next slide. The budget included new investments to support some critical first steps towards P3 alignment. First, our budget provides $10 million to update the California Preschool Learning Foundations to incorporate recent research in the field, including best practices to support dual language learners and inclusion of children with disabilities, and to develop curriculum and educator resources to implement those standards, as well as to adapt the desired results developmental profile to reflect the updated standards, address preschool to second grade, and include direct assessment of literacy and math. Second, the budget included expansion of the California Classified School Employee Teacher Credentialing Program and the Golden State Teacher Grant Program. Funding to relieve the burden of credentialing fees on prospective teachers and additional funding for the CTC to support residency programs to address staffing shortages. The budget also includes a significant expansion of the Expanded Learning Opportunities Program to support before school, after school, summer, and intersession learning programs. And the budget establishes the first phase of a long-term investment in student nutrition and universal meals to leverage the federal meal reimbursement rates and the program waivers that have been in place for the entire 2021-22 school year. The budget further provides ongoing funding to offer 2 school meals free of charge during each school day to all students. And finally, the budget includes $2.8 billion for CDE to create a competitive grant program to establish new and expand existing community schools and support LEAs that coordinate services and manage learning networks for these schools. All of these investments are interconnected and interdependent. In order for our students to thrive, all our programs and services must be implemented and coordinated well. And all of these programs can and should be leveraged to meet community needs and ensure that UPK is implemented effectively, which brings me to my next slide. We also have funding to support specific investments in universal preschool. First and foremost, the budget provides substantial funding to support a phase-in of a universally available TK program over 5 years. Beginning in 2022-23, TK is expanded to serve an additional 2 months of birthdays until universal TK is fully implemented in 2025-26. There are new quality improvement conditions for receipt of apportionment for students in a TK program, including reduced group size and adult to student ratios. To support the rollout of UPK, with a focus on implementing universal transitional kindergarten, the budget also includes $300 million for the new California Pre-Kindergarten Planning and Implementation Grant Program. Of the $300 million, $200 million will be directly allocated to local education agencies, or LEAs, for supporting planning and implementation costs to expand access to classroom-based pre-kindergarten programs at LEAs. The new LEA methodology language creates graduated base grants where LEAs with 1 to 23 kindergarten students will get a $25,000 base grant. LEAs with 24 to 99 kindergarten students will get a $50,000 base grant. And LEAs with 100 or more kindergarten students will get a $100,000 base grant. It also provides each county office of education with $15,000 of the total base grant allocation awarded to each LEA in their county to support county-wide planning and capacity building. And finally, $100 million will support a competitive workforce grant program for LEAs to increase the supply of highly qualified teachers and provide training to the California State Preschool Program, TK, and kindergarten teachers. This $100 million will be released via a competitive RFA for LEAs, and LEAs will also be able to apply on behalf of a consortium of providers within the LEAs, including CSPPs and Head Starts operated by CPOs. The grant's purpose is twofold. First, to increase the number of credentialed teachers meeting the requirements, and two, increasing the competencies of CSPP, TK, or K teachers in their abilities to provide instruction in inclusive classrooms, provide culturally responsive instruction supporting dual language learners, enhance social emotional learning, implement trauma-informed and restorative practices, and mitigate implicit biases to eliminate exclusionary discipline. We're hoping to release these funds by January 2022. We know the field is anxious to begin working on their teacher preparation as we dive into the coordination and collaboration with CTC and our external partners. The budget also includes additional funding for increased reimbursement rates for all CSPP programs, as well as an additional $130 million to support expansion of CSPP programs. And in recognition of the need to reduce administrative burden and increase flexibility for contractors, the budget includes funding to continue to support transfers between CSPP and CCTR contracts and to support family fee waivers for families in CSPP under specific circumstances. To address our priority of preschool inclusion, we have the Supporting Inclusive Practices, SIP, preschool grant, which provides funding for technical assistance to build, implement, sustain, monitor, and scale up evidence-based practices to increase inclusion in preschool settings. Through SIP, we also have the Preschool Local Assistance Grant, which provides funding for technical assistance. And we also continue to have the Inclusive Early Education Expansion Program, EAP, which supports the development of site-based inclusion leadership, community partnerships, professional development, and implementation of adaptive equipment for environmentally accessibility. Under our Multilingual Support Division, the CDE will be working to update its English Learner Roadmap policy and accompanying guidance first published in 2017 to address birth to 3, in order to fully address the learning and development continuum for DLLs by acknowledging that language development begins at birth. To support this work, the budget provides $10 million for 25 dual language immersion grants. Next slide. Part of our purpose here today is to help you get started about thinking about your UPK planning process. Before I hand it over to Hannah Melnick, a senior policy advisor working on early childhood issues at the Learning Policy Institute, to provide some thoughts and information about some key considerations for the planning process, I want to launch one more poll with 4 key questions about where you are in terms of your planning process. So first question, has your district started planning for TK expansion yet? Second, Who has been involved with your planning efforts so far? Third, where will oversight of TK expansion be housed in your district? And 4, how many of your instructional leaders have expertise in working with young children? If you don't see all the questions, be sure you scroll down on the bar to the side. We'll give it just a few more seconds to have the rest of you weigh in. All right, it looks like about half have done a little bit of planning for TK expansion at 52%. Only 7% have done a lot, and 42% have not yet started this thinking. So a timely webinar to really get people starting to think about this effort. Involved in the effort so far, 51% said that superintendents and assistant superintendents have been engaged. 16% have engaged their school board. 17% of elementary school principals. 29% of our California State preschool leaders. 16% with our Head Start directors. 27% have engaged early childhood experts. Only 4% have engaged parents to date. 14% have engaged our current TK and K teachers. 22% have engaged current early childhood educators, and 6% are higher education partners. Moving on to question 3. Where will oversight of TK expansion be housed in your district? Once again, there's a majority who don't know yet. You're just starting this planning effort or about to. 16% have determined it will be in their early learning division or office, with an equal number, 13%, in the curriculum and instruction office, 5% somewhere else, and another 25% have not yet determined. Last question. How many of your instructional leaders have expertise in working with young children? The majority of you said some at 38%, and then not many at 35%. And most of your instructional leaders got us 27%. Thank you all for taking part in that. That helps us understand a little bit of where we are and where we can do additional support. I am now going to hand this over to Hannah, our Senior Policy Advisor at the Learning Policy Institute, and she will be far more interesting than me and my budget slides. Take it away, Hannah.
Thank you, Sarah. And I don't know about being more interesting than talking about the money. I'm Hannah Melnick, Senior Policy Advisor at the Learning Policy Institute, where I co-lead our early learning team. It's already pretty clear in what Sarah has said that scaling universal preschool is going to be an extremely exciting and also complex endeavor. So today I want to talk just about 3 key considerations for getting started. Those include governance structures, leadership for early childhood and P3 alignment, and then building up teacher pipelines for early learning. When we're talking about early learning, we're starting from transitional kindergarten, but we're also talking about other preschool providers as well, and Head Start teachers and providers. These considerations are informed by the Learning Policy Institute's research in preschool expansion in other states, as well as our research in California's early learning system. So for each of the 3 considerations, I'll start with some key points. I'll share an example of where it's happening across California. And then after this webinar by email, we'll share several resources where you can dig in further. And then finally, we're going to end with a panel discussion where we have several panelists who can talk about how they're approaching each of these issues in their own districts, or how they have as they've already started to expand. So next slide. First, governance structures are key for a smooth rollout of any new preschool or TK initiative. By governance, I mean who's making decisions and how. There's currently so much variation across the state in who oversees early learning programs, including TK and state preschool. We do know that effective early learning initiatives make early learning a visible part of the district. So that means you're going to see early learning in districts' websites. The district's organizational chart will put early learning in a prominent place, and it's also going to be clearly part of any mission or vision statement. Early learning programs will also be easy for families to navigate in such a governance structure. It's very clear, who is eligible for what and when. The governance structure can promote integration across the P-3 spectrum. And that the governance structure can also set up a frame for being engaged with the community. So over half of you here are not at a district. You're early learning providers, Head Start, et cetera, higher ed too. So we really believe that districts and their partners should consider carefully where to situate universal preschool implementation, and make sure that there are folks that are engaging and working with all of the community-based providers, the local planning councils, the Head Start providers in higher ed that are going to be key to a successful universal preschool program. Next. So one place where early learning is a very visible part of the district, just one example is San Francisco Unified School District, which has a cabinet level appointment for early childhood education that oversees preschool, TK, and P3 alignment. There's a little bit more in one of the resources that we'll send out in a toolkit for thinking about the visibility of ECE in your district. And Carla Bryant helped create that, and she'll be on the panel later on. Next. Leaders are also going to be critical to successful P3 initiatives. By instructional leaders, I'm talking about district leaders, principals, coaches, early learning, early childhood education directors, and so on. P3 leaders need to have a vision for P3 alignment, how preschool and TK fit into the continuum of learning across the elementary grades, starting with the preschool learning foundations. They also need to have expertise in developmentally appropriate practices for early learners, including dual language learners and students with special needs. And just from the last poll, it's pretty clear that this is a need in many of your districts. And also they need to have strong family engagement. It's pretty clear that family engagement is part of the role of an early childhood site director, and similarly, it needs to be the role of any early learning district providers as well. And preschool to third grade leaders can also foster cross-grade collaboration. So this might include joint professional development that has preschool teachers included with their K-3 peers. It also means appropriate hiring and placement of teachers. All of this is very important to ensure that we're pushing developmentally appropriate practices from preschool up into the later grades, instead of having inappropriate practices from upper grades pushed into TK and preschool classrooms. So early learning leaders need to know what high quality preschool looks like in action and how that those practices unfold to the kindergarten and first grade years. Next. One place that has offered school leader training in the past is Fresno Unified School District. They had an early learning principals academy that perhaps Deanna Matthews, who's on our panel, will be able to tell us about today. This academy provided principals with workshops that were followed by walkthroughs of high quality preschool classrooms, along with a cohort of their peers. And the tool, the reflection rubric upon which it was based, will be sent out to you via email, along with some other resources. Next. And the third component consideration that we want to talk about today is obviously building a teacher pipeline. So TK, transitional kindergarten, is going to be at full implementation in 5 years. It's going to require as many as 11,000 new teachers statewide and 26,000 new assistant teachers, according to Berkeley researchers, which is huge. So we need, obviously, to be recruiting new teachers into preschool and TK. And when I say preschool and TK, I mean thinking about also childcare as well, and the whole spectrum of early learning educator positions, because many initiatives are expanding and we need to be thinking about building a supply of early educators overall, not just for one component of the system. We also need to be thinking about pathways for current preschool and K-8 teachers into TK. Especially our preschool teachers and community-based organizations and Head Start are going to be a critical resource as we're expanding, because they have a wealth of experience and knowledge of developmentally appropriate practice. Next. So in the next webinar on this series is going to be devoted to teacher pipelines. And I think some of these resources will be addressed, but just wanted to flag a couple of grant programs: the Teacher Residency Grant Program and the Classified School Employee Teacher Credentialing Program that your districts can use to build the supply of early educators on your campus. TK is identified as a shortage area for these grants. There's also the Golden State Teacher Grant Program that provides up to $20,000 scholarships for students who are seeking a teaching credential. And of course, the California Pre-Kindergarten Planning and Implementation Grant Program, that $300 million that Sarah has just discussed, can be used for building your teacher pathways. Next. In-service professional development is also going to be critical to building the knowledge and of developmentally appropriate practice in the existing workforce. So this can be through joint professional development of preschool through grade 3 teachers. Just want to highlight again that you can use funds from the new state funds as well as title funds to pay for professional development that's inclusive of Head Start and community-based providers, even those who aren't on your district. And there's a lot that preschool, TK, kinder, and up teachers can learn from one another. We also really hope that this professional development is supported by coaching. Research shows that coaching can allow what teachers are learning in their professional development sessions to put that into practice, to make it stick. And so coaches, again, are also going to need to have expertise in child development. Next. An example of joint professional development already happening in California are the schools in Los Angeles Unified School District that are participating in the SEAL project, Sobrato Early Academic Language. These teachers have their preschool and TK and K teachers taking professional development together on working with multilingual learners that's supported by coaching. And those practices are aligned with the practices that are being taught to the first through fifth grade teachers at their same school. Again, more resources will be sent out by email after this webinar. Next. So I'm now going to pass it to our panel facilitators. First to Sheila Self, Education Administrator in the Early Learning and Care Division, who's going to introduce our panelists who can really pick up on these three themes of first, governance, second, leadership, and third, building a teacher pipeline. Sheila?
Thank you so much, Hannah. Hello again. Before we begin our panelist discussion regarding how districts have implemented TK within their own district, I would like to introduce you to Dr. Carla Bryant. Dr. Bryant will be here to synthesize and actualize our discussion today. She has over 30 years of national experience creating culturally competent policies, programs, and procedures for comprehensive early learning P3, elementary, family support, and after-school programs. She is the creator and is the executive director for the Center of District Innovation and Leadership in Early Education. Welcome, Carla.
Welcome. Thank you, Sheila. And I will keep it brief so we can hear from our experts. Again, my name is Carla Bryant, and I am the director of the Center for District Innovation in Early Education. We call it DIAL-EE. I first like to acknowledge that we are going to listen to some amazing leaders, Deanna, Stephanie, and Cherry, who will share their direct experiences when implementing their preschool to third grade strategies. But I want to highlight a couple of things I think that everyone should listen for as they talk about their stories that will actually assist, I think, everyone that's online, even if you're in an urban, rural, large, small, extremely diverse district. And that one thing I like to elevate is these ladies all had an extensive communication process as they walked through their process. That communication process started with something just very basic, with just making sure that everyone understands what is UTK and how can UTK be leveraged to create this P3 initiative. This is a good place to start, is just simply get a PowerPoint, something very simple, and take it on the road. Take it to your superintendent, take it to every single department in your district, to your community, to your parents. I'm thinking about the survey that was taken that showed that 4% of the individuals online actually have reached out to their parents. But I'm going to ask that you actually reach out to your parents as part of the communication process, so everyone understands that this is an opportunity to create this alignment in the early ed in the K-12 space. So as you listen, just listen to how each one of these ladies are talking about that alignment that they were doing as part of their just basic work. And I'm going to stop there, Sheila, because I know everyone wants to listen to what they have to share.
Well, thank you so much, Dr. Bryant. So let's just jump right in and get started. But first, let me take a moment just to introduce our wonderful panelists. In no particular order, we have Stephanie Kemsky, Deanna Mathis, and Cherry Doria. So Stephanie has served as the Director of Early Learning Programs since 2016. Stephanie joined the district as a program manager for gifted and talented education in 2015. And with over 20 years experience, Stephanie's leadership includes serving as a school principal, assistant principal within the elementary, middle, and high school settings, Stephanie has been named as one of the ACSA Region 18 Administrators of the Year and has been cited in multiple research publications. Stephanie has earned her doctorate in organizational leadership from the University of La Verne and continues to serve as a program faculty and dissertation committee member. Welcome, Stephanie. Additionally, Deanna Mathis has worked in the field of education for more than 30 years. For the past 8 years, Deanna has overseen early learning in Fresno Unified School District and has guided the district in greatly expanding their services to children aged birth to 5. She has also led specifically funded projects, including the district's implementation of the Fresno County First 5 Birth through 3rd Grade Initiative and the David and Lucille Packard Foundation's Starting Smart and Strong Initiative. Welcome, Deanna. And finally, Cherry Doria has been in the field of education for over 22 years, 12 of those years in her current position in the field of early education. She oversees the Lindsay Preschool Transitional Kindergarten Program and has continued to expand the program on an ongoing basis. LUSD provides services to over 450 preschool TK learners in 13 learning environments, taught by full-time, highly trained learning facilitators at 5 of the 6 elementary school sites located in Lindsay. Welcome, Sherry. So let's begin with our first question. So to begin with, tell us a little bit about transitional kindergarten expansion in your district. And briefly, why did you decide to expand and what was one of the biggest obstacles you had to overcome? Who'd like to start us off?
I can go ahead and start. So in our district, well, TK was implemented, I believe, fall of 2012. And basically our district did as many other districts and did TKK combos across the board. So all of our elementary sites had TKK combos. And to be honest, I don't even know necessarily, and we use the word learning facilitator for teacher. So if I say LF or learning facilitator, you know I'm referring to a teacher. But honestly, I'm not even sure if the learning facilitator knew who the TK learners were and who the kindergarten learners were at different times, which drove me crazy. So then I realized that we weren't really doing TK and we weren't doing justice to our TK learners. So every year I went to the table and I advocated, I fought, I like begged, pleaded, can we do TK? And like a real TK with TK learning environments and not these combo classes. And it took a little while because obviously planning, it took about 3 years, but the district finally agreed to create real TK learning environments. But as long as, so it's like, okay, but here, this is your baby, you run it, you create it, you plan it, you provide the training to the staff, you oversee it. And so I was like, yes, that's great, I will do that. So August of 2015, we opened 2 TK learning environments at 2 of the 6 elementary sites. So that was a step forward. However, I did notice that even though these are better than the TKK combos that we had before, they still were not ideal or developmentally appropriate learning environments for TK. The ratio was 27-1, and they were in learning environments without restrooms and just a lot of other inappropriateness. And as you can imagine what could be going on without restrooms and how are they getting to the restroom? And there's so many little learners to one adult. So I knew this wasn't the best thing for our learners. So I contacted the state and brainstormed and received approval to create a pre-K TK learning environment in which we do a wraparound type program with CSPP and TK. So this created a seamless full day experience for them. So that's how we came about.
Great. How about others?
So I'll go next. In about 2012, Fresno Unified expanded pre-K services to the entire community using LCFF funds. So we served children who qualified for CSPP and then also served children who didn't qualify using LCFF funds. And it was part of our previous superintendent's mission to begin to close the gap before the gap begins. So we expanded services back then. And part of the question talks about a big obstacle. So as we went into preschool and worked hard on increasing the quality of the programs and really making them an integral part of the school rather than the little preschool classrooms at the end of the campus, we noticed that the practices being used in preschool were developmentally appropriate and much more rigorous than the practices that were being used in kindergarten. So I would say that was an obstacle, was the developmental learning stopping at the door of kindergarten.
Wow. That must have been an aha moment at that point, Deanna. Have a rigorous preschool. Stephanie, do you have anything to share on topic?
Sure, thank you. Just as my colleagues mentioned, our preschool program back in 2016 was part of a silo. And when I came in 2016, that's when San Diego Unified began its integration and integrated throughout the district. And so over time, I took a look at preschool enrollment, CSPP enrollment, the continuum, as well as the enrollment for TK. And just as both my colleagues shared, the TK enrollment, there was a lot of TKK combos. And as we all know, the instructional developmental readiness component of that piece is not in pure alignment of what the students need. So last year, we began a program for what is called TK4. That was, it launched last year, where we commingled 4-year-olds under CSPP with age-eligible TK students. And so when UTK was rolled out or announced for this year, we were poised and ready for the district to implement UTK. We have the facilities. We have a TK classroom at every elementary school. So we had the facilities, we had the alignment of curriculum due to our TK4 launch, and we were able to implement UTK and get the ground running.
Wow. TK program at every elementary campus. That's wonderful in San Diego. So the next question is, what steps has your district taken to ensure that TK is instructionally appropriate for young children? Stephanie, can I come back to you and have you share your thoughts on this?
Sure. So some steps that we've taken to provide that alignment of instruction is our early childhood educators are well-versed in the preschool learning foundations. And our TK multiple subject teachers are well-versed in the standards. So what we've done to ensure that these are appropriate for young children is that it's actually a co-teaching model within the classroom. So we have the TK teacher and the ECE teacher co-teaching, leveraging that expertise and that alignment of that early learner and kindergarten readiness. And it really has helped with that application where you take theory into application and that demonstration where they both see in action. In addition, we've examined many documents on the CDE's website. We've examined different DRDP overlays or crosswalks so that we understand the narrative behind the different developmentally appropriate the progress and what age they should be, what should they be accomplishing at what point in time. That narrative using the DRDP has been so wonderful for our TK teachers as well, because it really describes that learning component and what you're going to observe in a classroom. In addition, it's very important that our principals are very knowledgeable in that alignment as well, as they do walkthroughs with their area superintendents, as I do walkthroughs with them, and having the understanding and that narrative around what to expect when you walk into that classroom has been extremely helpful. Another thing that we implemented this year is peer experts. And that's, through demonstration classrooms, through demonstration lessons, and someone located in their area or a peer school that they can lean on and pop into their classroom, or have the teachers collaborate and talk together through different forums has been extremely helpful in understanding that alignment.
Well, I'm sure that started some thoughts. Sherry or Deanna?
I can go, or Sherry, do you want to go first? In terms of the rigor and making certain that it was a developmentally appropriate program, we did, as Stephanie did, we started with the foundations and the frameworks, and we took the educators that were in those classrooms deep into them as part of our professional learning. And we also did a crosswalk with the Common Core kindergarten standards and the preschool 48-month standards. And what we found, and that was an activity we used in Principals Academy, was that the preschool foundations were more rigorous. They went deeper than the Common Core standard. So focusing on the frameworks and foundations really helped us keep it at a rigorous program.
Thank you. Sherry?
Yes, so after I got approval to do this pre-K TK combo, then our learning environments did in fact become more developmentally appropriate, because now we are in licensed learning environments. All of our TKs are licensed, and they are 8-to-1 ratio. They have learner restrooms, they have a kitchen area, and similar to Stephanie, we have kind of the dual teacher where we have a credentialed, certificated TKLF, and then we have a preschool learning facilitator who has the child development teacher permit. So there's both of those learning facilitators in there, which makes a great combo. And then we also have an AM assistant, and then a part-time AM assistant and a part-time PM assistant. And those two assistants also have 12 units of early childhood development at least. And usually they also have a teacher permit too. And it's worked really well for us. We follow all Title 22 and Title 5 regulations in our TK learning environments. Our TK learning environments do DRDP. They also do ASQs, and they are assessed in ECHRS in class. And that kind of also, sometimes it can be challenging to get those TK learning environments to be developmentally appropriate, but when you implement the ECHRS in the class, it kind of leads it right there, where they want to score well, and so they start to implement all of these early childhood procedures, which was really great. And our TK outdoor learning environments are also licensed, so they follow ECHRS outside. They have a variety of toys, materials, bikes, the different areas in order for the outdoor time to be instructional. It's not recess like at the elementary sites it usually is. It's an outdoor learning experience, which is really great. And I'll put a plug in. If I had a wish, I would like that LEAs could also have the option to utilize our model, in which the TK learning environment has one LS that is credentialed and another who has the 24 units, rather than one person having to have it all. That could be one of the options, but this could possibly be another option, because the collaboration between the two is really great. And you can send people back to school, but that doesn't necessarily give them all of that background, and it's worked really well for us. So if we could keep that as an option, I'd be really excited.
Sounds like you used a lot of local wisdom in planning for that. So that's really, really awesome. So moving to the next question, where does governance, as Hannah had previously mentioned, where does governance fit for preschool and TK at your district? We got a sense of it through the poll, but what kind of benefits or challenges do you see in terms of where that governance structure resides? Who would you want in this effort if you were having to start over? Deanna?
Yeah, I feel pretty passionately about this one. I think early learning departments jump around district structures often under different umbrellas. I really believe that curriculum and instruction, it should land under curriculum and instruction, but there needs to be an arm in curriculum and instruction departments that are early childhood focused. And it really should be infants, if you have infant programs and LEAs, infants through at least second grade. That is one of the barriers to a developmentally appropriate classroom, is trying to fit a program that's really child development focused because of the way a child's brain develops in those first 8 years of life. So where early childhood falls in a system structures really guides that whole continuum and the quality, and it if you do it right, you get the best outcomes. So I would say under the instructional division, but there's got to be an ECE arm to it.
So it's not just an afterthought, it's really integral. Great.
Right, so it doesn't become a first grade classroom and pushing learning down rather than pushing up appropriate structures up.
Great. Stephanie, how about you?
So within San Diego Unified School District, we have the Early Learning Program Department, and it's actually housed under Leadership and Learning. And I think the little bit difference is under Leadership and Learning is not only just instruction, but that's where our Office of Language Acquisition is, that's where our counseling, that's where our instructional pieces are, that's where our secondary schools are. So when Leadership and Learning is at the table, Early Learning Programs is sitting there with all departments across the district. And so in addition to other departments such as facilities or labor relations or human resources, there is an early learning representative, me, sitting at the table representing preschool all the way through second grade. And so we do this vertical alignment, and it's included in the district. We have for example, we have an early literacy acceleration program going on right now, and that's represented from TK4 all the way up to second grade. And I sit at the table advising on the early learning side of it.
Great. Sherry?
So in our district, I pretty much oversee the programming component. So I'm the director of preschools, and I evaluate the preschool staff, and then the site admin or the principal oversees or evaluates the credentialed TK learning facilitator. So it's kind of nice in the sense that the director of preschools and the principal collaborate and share that responsibility. What I would want is I would just like my other two colleagues here, definitely I think it should be required to have a designated person in charge of the district's entire early learning, somebody with that background. I also believe, just another plug here, if I'm gonna have my wishes pie in the sky, I also think that the UTK should have its own resource code in the budget so that the funds will actually get spent where the funds need to be spent. This way, LEAs will be required to spend a specific amount of money in UTK in order to ensure that those learning environments are developmentally appropriate, high quality, and following all the guidelines and regulations that they should be. I think there's a lot of challenges if you have somebody in the positions that don't understand early childhood. And I do fear that some districts may just put that under the principal or the site admin, and that could be really detrimental and not what's most beneficial to our TK learners.
Great, thank you. So our fourth question is, how have you supported P3 administrators in developing their early learning expertise? Sounds like we have some variation from our panel, so who'd like to jump in on question 4?
Thank you. I can jump in first. In even adding on to the previous question, one of the biggest, if I had to do it over, I would do this again. One of the biggest recommendations I could make is that strategic systems thinking of how you communicate to your internal and external stakeholders. It's so important to actually really articulate it and plan it out, and it makes a huge difference. Some of the things that went into the planning of this led to how we supported administrators. So working at the executive cabinet level, working with the area superintendents, funneling it down to the different directors of the departments, and then having a principal operational meeting, a principal instructional meeting where we're sharing an intentional, purposeful planning and sharing of information has made such a big difference. So that we're all in the shared vision, we all have the common vocabulary. I can't tell you, when people interchange vocabulary, it will go south. So it's very important that you get on the same page, and it sounds like a lot of work, but it's worth it in the long run. It's just like when you have a classroom and you take the time to really do that classroom management in the first weeks of school, and it makes such progress in the end. It's the same for adult learners. And some of the different principal initiatives that we've done is we have one-on-one collaboration sessions where I would go visit, but pre-COVID, I'd go visit principals and spend an hour's time with them and do walkthroughs and talk and answer their individual questions, because every school is different. And sometimes in a big form, they didn't get their needs met. So we implemented that. We also have right now during this time is bi-monthly voluntary sessions that principals can sign up on, and someone from either me or someone from my department, a designee, will call them and have a 15-minute phone chat. That's really been helpful in getting their needs met. Also, area superintendents do walkthroughs. We have PLCs, and we also have university partnerships that help principals feel confident in their knowledge and skill base.
Great. Deanna?
So when we expanded early learning, one of our big ahas was that we were doing children and teachers, preschool teachers were doing this great work in the early years. And oftentimes it stopped at the door of kindergarten, and Common Core and practices that really should have gone up into kinder became squashed. So that was our big learning, and it's why, along with Julie Montali, she's now with SCOE, we created the Early Learning Principal Academy in Fresno Unified, and it was built on the framework of NAESP's Early Learning Framework for Principals. And it was a course. We did it each semester. So they were classes at night for principals. It was voluntary, but I think at the end of it, we got at least 90% of principals that participated. And we had sessions in the evening, and then we created PLCs where they would have a principal group, and we would walk sites together, and we'd walk the continuum with look-fors that we had created. We also had activities within it that took them into the foundations and the frameworks, took them into what if you walk into a classroom, what do you see the teacher doing? What do you see the instructional assistant doing? What do you see the children doing? So they knew what to look for and how it could look different in kindergarten, but you would still use the same practices. And then we did one-on-one coaching with each principal. So it was an intense model, and you do have to have the energy and the support to do it, but it was really coursework. And then the other piece I would say is that having your superintendent stand in the gap and having the superintendent buy in and say, this is where we're going. We are going to support young children. That and saying that in front of instructional superintendents and principals goes a long way.
Yeah. Great. Sherry?
So very similar to my colleagues, just having that open communication and educating the principals. And we also would do observations. So the principal and I would do walkthroughs in the TK learning environments and have conversations about the things that we were seeing and why they're doing certain things and things that we could improve on. And making sure that we educated the site admin so that they knew what was developmentally appropriate. An example I had was I had a TKLF who was extremely worried that she was going to get in trouble when her admin walked in if they were caught playing. Like, there's a kitchen in there, but heaven forbid that the learners use it, because if the site admin came in and saw them, then they would be in trouble that they were playing. And so we really needed to, in some instances, educate admin, and some instances it was more so just educating that learning facilitator that we're all on the same page, and that that the admin and what I'm telling them is what the admin is expecting also, that it's okay for them to be doing intentional play as long as you know why they're playing there and what the goals are. And so the administrators and I would, go into the learning environments together, and we would show those learning facilitators that we were on the same page and that we're not asking for separate things. And so that really helped.
Wow, that's great. Okay, so question 5. How have you developed an effective preschool and TK educator workforce? And what are your plans to expand the workforce in the coming years? And we'll also put an asterisk by this one because we know we're having a bit of a teacher shortage. So how are you guys able to address the teacher educator workforce?
Go first. So we saw some excellent instruction in preschool classrooms that was untapped. We saw some wonderful teachers using great strategies. That was an untapped resource in our own system. So we developed vertical articulation and professional learning communities. So we pulled in TK, kinder at the time, kinder and preschool teachers together, and created demo teachers and demo sites. And so really the teachers were teaching each other, and the preschool teachers were teaching kinder teachers developmentally appropriate practice, and they visited each other's sites, wrote down what they observed, and then would talk in small groups about what they saw, what they wanted to do, like what did they take away, what did they want to implement in their classrooms. And I think that that went a long way in building up the preschool teachers who are sometimes not looked upon the same way as a kindergarten teacher. It really built them up, and then it allowed our kindergarten teachers to learn some developmentally appropriate practice, which in certain instances, they didn't have that knowledge. And then we're doing quite a bit of work now around planning for teacher residency programs and figuring out how we're going to get everybody the right kind of units that they need so that they can continue doing their wonderful work.
Great. Any other thoughts?
In addition to what Deanna just shared, just some additional things that we've implemented is through university partnerships that we, internships. What we're fortunate with is in the co-teaching model, the ECE teacher has the opportunity to earn their multiple subject credential because they're teaching alongside a multiple subject credential as a supervisor. Also, we have a micro-credential program that we launched this previous year that we plan to expand over next year. Also, with our university partnerships, in the trailer bill, there is very specific professional development that is written in for Universal Transitional Kindergarten. I'm very excited about it. So adding those courses or that series in to help a more enriching environment for inclusive settings, anti-racist, anti-bias, social emotional wellness. That's really important, and I'm glad that we look forward to having that added in. Another thing that we are exploring as we plan for expansion is we really want to focus on our current students, our high school students, and possibly create a dual enrollment program where high school students could earn the ECE units or start the early childhood unit program. And so that when they graduate from high school, they're poised to enter the workforce, or we're in the early stages of planning, but it's something that our wish is to transform communities where we would target our high schools and then have them enter our workforce within our district.
That sounds really innovative. Sherry, how about you?
So that is something that we are doing, is the dual enrollment classes with our community college at our high school. So that, and it's just starting. And so that when they graduate high school, they'll have enough units that they can sub in our preschool program. Technically, they could even be an assistant. And while they're going to school to finish their degree and their credentials. So that is a great way to start that process. We also hired this year a P3 curriculum and instruction specialist who will be taking the preschool through third grade into the learning environments so that the kindergarten learning facilitators can get in and observe the preschool learning facilitators and vice versa, and all across the different grade levels so that they can see what's happening and learn from each other. We found that sometimes, the learners will come into kindergarten and the kindergarten learning facilitators think, oh, well, they don't hold them necessarily to certain standards. They don't really know how to clean up. So we bring them into the preschool learning environments and show them, oh yes, they know how to clean up and they can do this. So getting that so that they can see the different things that learners are doing in the learning environments. I will say I do worry about the workforce in UTK once it's fully implemented, if we can't do that co-teaching model. I know we have TKLFs that are grandfathered in, and we have preschool staff who do not currently have teaching credentials. And, it can be challenging for some staff to go back to school with their families and while working full time. And just because they don't have the proper education doesn't mean that they aren't the best person for the position. So I am a little worried about that. And I hope that we do get great people in these positions and we don't lose good people because the going back to the school can be a huge challenge for some families.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So our last question is, can you share with us your approaches for supporting dual language learners and inclusion of children with disabilities in your preschool and TK programs?
I can start. For dual language learners, out of the Starting Smart and Strong grant with the Packard Foundation, one component of that grant was testing different professional development models. So here in Fresno, we looked at the data, the school age data, and found that our English learners, that was the term that they use in K-12, English learners were not performing as well as the English only speakers. So we took that data to our partners in Head Start, in the resource and referral for licensed family child care, and to the County Office of Ed, and said, okay, what can we do as a community to figure out how to better support dual language learners as a community in one approach? So we brought in the experts and we created a professional development model based on supporting dual language learners with English language development using home language supports. And it really encompasses the family and getting to know the family and their culture and what they value and what they want for their children. And then concrete strategies, very concrete classroom strategies for educators to implement. The piece that was unique is we implemented all the way into the infant and toddler programs, but we did it across the community. So we learned side by side with Head Start, licensed home providers. So our teachers in the district learned side by side with licensed home providers, and that was a gift to us all. And then the County Office of Ed, they have a child care center. So we all learned together in that space. And then we spread it to Tulare County and Kern County. And there's a website that you can access if anybody wants it. I can send it to Sheila and she can send it out. But that's what we're doing for dual language learners. And then I will, in all transparency, say we were not good about inclusive programs and building them. Part of that is due to the structure. Early education lives in special education, children with special needs 0 to 5 lives under special education, and then there's early education that lives with us. So we wrote a grant for the IEEP. We had one inclusive program, and now we are at either 17 or 18 within 2 years. So our goal is that we have the majority of our preschool early learning classrooms will be inclusive. And again, we have to get the superintendent behind that, so it becomes his goal, which he has.
Yeah, Sherry?
So all of our preschool learning facilitators and TK learning facilitators did the deep dive of the Sobrato Early Academic Language, which is the SEAL model. And that has been phenomenal in our program. It's rigorous, joyful, and language-rich learning. And we've found that our families love it, our learners love it, and our staff at first were very scared and hesitant to take on obviously something new and something as big as SEAL, and they love it. So that has been very beneficial for our all of our learners, but especially our dual language learners. We also, because our TK is 8-to-1 ratio, we make sure that Spanish is a predominant language in our community. And so we make sure that one of the adults in that learning environment speaks Spanish. That way they can help support the learners and the families. That's another thing that we've been making sure to do to help support them. And we also, for our inclusion, we are an inclusive preschool. And TK, we currently have 23 learners on IEPs, and 2 of those are in TK learning environments. And we continue as learners transition into our program. We have we will have more learners on IEPs. And I will say that one of the things that has been really beneficial for our inclusion is that we have a pre-K TK special education support team. And that support team meets monthly, and that consists of a preschool education specialist, a speech and language pathologist, a preschool psychologist, our family resource program specialist, and a family services licensed marriage and family therapist, and myself. So we've got a great team. And what the team, we meet monthly and we go over our different learners, and we We see what's working, what's not working, what we could be doing more of. But the key thing that I think really benefits is the staff get in and model and coach in the learning environment. So when they have learners with challenging behaviors, they can get in there, they can step in, they can provide skills, they can provide materials and supplies. If they need fidgets, they can coach them, teach them. And so that's been really beneficial for to help our staff and get them prepared for our learners who are challenging.
Just to add on, in addition to what my colleagues shared for instructionally, the coaching cycles, the integrated approach, and the parent engagement is so essential. I'll just speak more structurally in our program. So our schools, all of our elementary schools are grouped by area clusters. So for example, there's area 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And for that area, there's a program manager that is from the special education department, and there's an instructional coordinator that is from the Office of Language Acquisition. And those, the program manager and the instructional coordinator, myself and the principal and the area superintendent, we all collaborate on the different supports and structures needed to be in place for that school site. Also, our intent, something behind, where our current classrooms are, we have 18 part-day preschool locations in addition to our 69 UTK classrooms, and we purposely put the part-day classrooms on a campus with a UTK. So, or where there's an infant toddler program. So it's actually a developmental continuum that limits the transitions, that limits the disruption for a student, and where they start, they can transition into their neighborhood school. Also, something that we're really proud of is every single one of our schools and classrooms have students with IEPs or dual language learners. So we probably have, close to 400 students with IEPs. Our part-day programs are co-taught between an early childhood special education teacher and an ECE teacher. So that expertise, again, is shared within that environment. And then those students will transition into the UTK classroom. We also have mod severe programs, preschool programs located throughout the clusters. And again, they're located on the same campus, strategically placed on the same campus where those programs are. So that way there's inclusive opportunities because they have different para-educators or SETs that can push in to different components of the day.
Wow. What incredible education leaders you all are. Such a privilege to hear you speak today. So at this point, I'd like to welcome back Dr. Bryant to help gather some key themes and takeaways for us today. This has been a very rich discussion, Dr. Bryant, so best of luck to you.
Yes, they shared a lot and it was great. Again, it just tells us just how much work there is to do, but it's all manageable. Because of time, I'm going to highlight just 3 big things that each person brought to light. And I'm going to go back to the first thing I asked everyone to listen for, and that was the communication. That throughout their process, they made sure that they were communicating with multiple groups of people, internally and externally. I'm going to say, because over 60 to 70% of the participants stated that they were at the beginning stages of the planning, that step 1 is that you have to figure out what you have to say about TK, because you're going to build that common language that Stephanie referred to. Mm-hmm. And you want to build that common language, but you also want to get everyone on the plan or everyone excited about this opportunity. The second one is everyone needs to memorialize exactly what has happened in the last 10 years with TK in their own district. Each person provided a reflection point throughout their process. I went back to my classrooms. They were not as developmentally appropriate as I thought. I needed to make some changes. Step 2, you have to tell people what is coming, what is different. This next step, memorializing what is currently in place, so that you may take advantage of this new and updated TK process. Also, you find out what you're doing well. There are things that we may not know about it, but you know about it, that you want to make sure that that part of the rollout, the initial rollout of TK, or actually your preschools. You may have an amazing relationship with your preschools in the community. You may have an amazing preschool that's in your district, but you want to know what you are doing well so you can make sure that you're leveraging that. You also want to memorialize what is going on with the alignment process. This is a good time to ask questions about your assessment process, and does it align with what's happening in PKK first and second? This is a good time to start talking about, so where are we in our process when it comes to inclusion? So step 2, where are you? And then the third one is where you start to identify a clear set of steps of where do you start with this. The 3 ladies who shared are so, I mean, they are amazing. And they provided a lot of information about multiple years of putting together a strategy. No matter where you are in your strategy, step 1 is we have to make sure that we do universal TK, or wink, wink preschool. But from there, maybe a year later, you start talking about things like, okay, this is a good time now that we have started to implement UTK, that we look to what is happening in the kindergarten classroom that actually aligns with the work that we're doing with something as simple, it's not simple, as inclusion. It's simple to me because I think everyone should be doing it. This is where you start asking the questions about, where am I partnering? How can I partner with other things that are happening in the district so we can create this alignment? I'm going to say, because I believe in alignment that goes infant, toddler, all the way through, but sometimes we can't start there. We start with our strengths. That's why you're going to memorialize what you are doing. And then the next, we're going to identify our steps, our strategy. And then I'm not even going to talk about you need to budget it out. But for step 1, everyone on here, go get your PowerPoint together that you're going to go and you're going to take to anyone who will listen to you about this exciting opportunity to actually enhance what we've already started. And I'm going to leave it at that and share this last piece with you. This has been a hard year, but what we learned is that districts can make change quickly, and they can go a lot further than we thought we could. So do not lose this opportunity to actually start to spread the word that every district, no matter if you have a CSPP program or not, must have a P3 or early education strategy. I call it the first quarter. No one has a game plan and does not talk about the first quarter. So good luck.
Thank you so much, Dr. Bryant. Thank you so much. So Sarah, do you have any final words as we close out today? We have just about a minute.
Thank you so much, Sheila. What an amazing discussion. Thank you all for joining us today. I'm really sorry we have to end it, but I do want to take just a moment to close out our time here with a few reminders. First, we want to assure all our partners there will be ongoing support and resources to continue developing specific state and local strategies to build P3 approaches in your counties, districts, classrooms, and programs. One way to ensure you hear about all of those resources is through a newsletter, which we are sharing with everyone who is subscribed to our listserv. We also wish we could have gotten to all of your questions today, but we just weren't able to. We know we'll need to work with all of you on planning to address specific rural needs, how to engage community-based partners, including CSPP, Head Start, private, and expanded learning programs, to address equity and teacher compensation and teacher pipeline issues, and have supports for CSPP and TK throughout all of this process. There were other questions around use of the DRDP, or Desired Results Developmental Profile. And what we'll do as we move forward with changes to the assessments and to the preschool learning foundations. So we will continue to work with all of you and give updates as more and more comes out, as we have more resources and more specificity. We also have 2 inboxes set up for your specific questions. One for P3 alignment at p3-alignment@cde.ca.gov, and another for your preschool and TK questions at upk@cde.ca.gov. We also want to share that our next webinar in our P3 series will be on October 28th, and we'll focus on how you can begin to intentionally integrate all of the new historic investments to build a pre-K to 12 educational system that meets the needs of today's students, families, and teachers. This one will include directors from our multilingual, our expanded learning, and our special ed divisions. There were several shout outs to make sure we include Heather Calamise, our Director of Special Education. And I want to assure you that Heather is part of our P3 work and part of us thinking through how to start inclusion from the very beginning. Thank you all again and have a great week. Thank you to our speakers, the districts, Carla, Hannah, and our Sheila and our entire team at CDE.